First of all, what a crowd. Welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast, America alongside Friedman and Delich. And first of all, Elliotte, what a crowd. Let's begin there. This is the post-first round NHL Draft podcast. And to me, one of the stars of the show. We'll get into some of the players, etc. And Joe Sakic, congratulations, GM of the year. Fans made this. Fans made this a great night.
It was great to be back at a draft, which was a real draft. I agree with you. The fans were spectacular. I think the NHL has been considering what to do with the draft.
In what sense?
Just in the future. I think so one of the theories I've heard is that they have been talking about a neutral site draft. For example,
the draft of dreams, if you hold it, they will come.
Well, I think one of the things that they kind of talked about was, what if they put it in a place like Disney World?
Okay, so they're going to treat this sort of like a neutral site version of the Winter Classic.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of the way the drafts are done in a lot of other sports, it's not like this. Mm-hmm. I think one of the ideas they had was, do you ever have a draft like sort of like the NFL does, where the players are on site, but the teams, do they make announcements at their own draft party? So I think they've thought about some different ideas. And like I said, I think they considered a neutral site where maybe one year they take a draft to a place like Disney World because they think it could be spectacular. And it would be quite a scene. Like I thought about it, and I really was interested in the idea when one of the teams mentioned it to me about the possibility of doing something like that.
The hockey geek in me says, okay, but it's got to be at a hockey place. Like it's got to be at Lake Placid, or it's got to be like some place where it is there is like some hockey significance attached to it.
I think that's fair, and I bet you they would consider it. I never even thought of anything like that, but I bet you if you brought it up, they would at least consider it.
Hamilton, Old Cops Coliseum, or is that a little sensitive?
Now you're just going down a rabbit hole. But anyway, what I was saying is that I think one of the other ideas is that I think the Canadians would like to host more drafts.
The Habs would.
Yes.
They do it great. Now, this was helped a lot because they were holding the first overall pick, and that doesn't happen very often, but still.
But where was the NHL draft held for a long time?
Montreal.
Yes.
Every year. Well, we were walking down the street the other day and we were saying, like, look how much history is in this building. Look outside the Queen Elizabeth. Like, how much NHL history, now a lot of NHL brain cells at the same time too, but how much NHL history happened at the Queen Elizabeth? How much NHL history has happened here? Like it's hand to glove. Well, NHL offices used to be here.
Exactly. So this was perfect for that reason. And I do think there have been some conversations about should one of the things one of the teams told me is that the draft isn't as popular an event as an all-star game or something like that, because it's not necessarily as big a moneymaker. Mm-hmm. So a team like Montreal, if they were interested in something like that, I think that there would be some potential discussion about it. So they didn't announce next year's draft tonight, and I think they eventually will announce it. I think they're starting to figure out where it's going to be. However, I think they considered something unique this year, and that's one of the reasons they're a little later in announcing it. But I think they have, from what I've heard, I think they have a city. They just haven't announced it yet. But one of the reasons it took a bit longer to be announced is that they considered something unique. And whether it was 32 draft parties with the players at a central location, whether it was a neutral site like Disney World or Lake Placid, or whether or not they were thinking about, do we do Montreal again? I think they want... Like, this was a special night. I agree with you. I think they're looking for some kind of pizzazz like that.
So you've known me a long time now. One of the things I'm sure you've heard me talk about plenty and your eyes roll back is I'm in love with, in sports specifically, that fraction of a second right before an event happens. And whether it's, I think of the Nat Turovsky picture of 1951, Bill Barelko scoring. And the picture is great because the puck hasn't gone in the net yet. It's right before the event actually occurs. You know what was really cool tonight? The moment right before Kent Hughes said Yuri Slafkovsky. That moment in life, Elliotte, I adore. I love that little slice of life right before something happens. And that to me was one of the highlights of it, because there was so much anticipation, so much built up on this thing. And, I had 2 Montreal Canadiens fans behind me. I was on the floor, and both of them were very much pro Shane Wright. And there was people, make the right choice. T-shirts were everywhere, all over the building. That moment, because it's like a lockup. It's right before the moment before two fighters lock up. I loved it, and I felt it tonight. And to me, it set a great tone for the whole night. And then anytime any of the prospects that just got drafted by the Montreal Canadiens showed up, the chanting started and the singing started. I'm just saying, it was a great evening for a lot of reasons, and those are just a couple for me. What did it for you?
Well, there was a lot of action. There's no question about that. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of moves. I thought the draft was interesting. I don't follow the prospects as closely as you do, or Jason or Sam or Pierre, but it's pretty obvious that there were some big rises and big falls.
Yeah,
like in terms of some of the players who went up and some of the players who went down. But obviously, Chicago was a huge story, and they made a couple of moves. It's really interesting. Ottawa was in a situation where earlier in the day, Matt Murray vetoed a trade to Boston. Sorry, Matt Murray vetoed a trade to Buffalo, as is his right.
Yeah.
But that pick, they were going to flip picks with Buffalo. So as part of that deal, Buffalo was going to get Ottawa's first round pick, and Ottawa was going to get Buffalo's Vegas pick.
Okay, so the Buffalo pick at 9 was going to be that one, or was going to be 16? 16, okay.
It was the Vegas pick. And all of a sudden that doesn't happen, and Ottawa fans, they're disappointed, and then we find out that, okay, well, we're not going to do that, so we're going to use that pick and trade it for Alex DeBrincat.
Yeah. What did you make of the deal? I know
I was shocked. Yeah. I was really surprised. And, I think the thing is that it took me a little while to get my head around it. If you go back through the last couple of weeks when the news got out that they were really making everybody available, the word on DeBrincat was, if he was getting traded, you would look at the deal and you would understand. And even recently, Kyle Davidson said, we're not going to just do it to give him away. And in our interview tonight with him after the first pick, it's interesting. So somebody told me they heard the last couple of days that if Chicago trades up, they were taking that defenseman.
Kevin Korchinski, Seattle Thunderbirds.
That was the guy that they wanted. And someone said to me, if Chicago gets high in the first round, he's going to be a guy they go after. And so Kyle Davidson said in the interview I did with him that we wanted this player, so we made the deal. Mm-hmm. And that's fair. And I know that there were some people who said that they really liked the players Chicago picked, good prospects.
There are a few teams that like Korchinski, from what I'm told.
And also the second pick, Frank Nazar. Look, people like them. It's just a lot lower than what I expected. And it's a lot lower than a lot of people expected. There's always, when a team makes a trade, there's always people who come out and say, well, we gave them a better offer, or we made them a better offer. I just think that teams were surprised when they saw what the return was. Yeah. And for whatever reason, somewhere in the last couple of weeks, this changed from Chicago saying we're not trading him unless we have to because the deal is so good to we're just trading him now. And the whole argument of, he was due a big extension. You've got time. If Alex DeBrincat goes up and puts another 40-goal season or even has any kind of decent season, it's not like you're not going to be able to trade him for a good return. I just think for whatever reason, the Blackhawks decided they had to make that trade now. And some of the conversations I'm hearing over the last 24 to 48 hours, they really intensified their attempts to make the trade now. Mm-hmm. But I think there were teams who were surprised that they did it with that deal. Not because they felt necessarily they outbid them, but it's because they weren't expecting it based on where the talk started and where they ended up.
You know, one of the conversations I had with someone tonight was about this deal was they were surprised that Ottawa didn't have to include any prospects. And they have a lot, specifically on the back end. Like, no one expects them to trade Jake Sanderson. But, you know, Lassie Thompson, Jacob Bernard Docker. I know they just drafted Tyler Clevin, but still, they have a lot of prospects on the back end. And one person that I spoke to said, I'm still shocked that they got Alex DeBrincat and didn't have to give up a body. All they had to do was give up picks. So this one, we thought if it's going to happen, it's going to be a combination of like a high draft pick and a prospect and maybe another later pick. And they ended up giving that in the third. But this one person who's pretty plugged in was like, how did Ottawa just do this and not have to give up a body? Like it's a tidy bit of business here by Pierre Dorian. You really do have to say.
Connor Bedard, like Chicago's all in for Connor Bedard.
The race is on between them and Arizona.
And the thing is, even if you win the lottery, it's not like even if you finish dead last, it's not like you're guaranteed to win the lottery. You know what I heard?
You give yourself I get it. You just give yourself a great chance. That's all.
You know what I heard a lot of tonight too,
What's
Jeff,
that?
Was that Chicago being good is good business for the league at a time that we're coming out of COVID.
Yep.
And I think there were a lot of people who looked at it and said, boy, that's a big revenue franchise that's just shutting it down.
They're stripping it right down. They're stripping this thing right down. Like seriously, like the whole time that I'm watching this all go down, Elliotte, I'm thinking, what's going through Jonathan Toews' mind, what's going through Patrick Kane's mind, and what's going through Seth Jones' mind. What are they thinking as they're watching all of this around them just get taken down to the nuts and bolts? Because that's the way Chicago's doing it.
I think that. Davidson said in the post game and after the draft, he said, and I do think this is right, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see it and see what the return is. I think all those players, Seth Jones has a no trade, his partial no trade until the 13th. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to take that deal. Yeah. But it's real now for Kane and Toews. And their agent, Pat Brisson, went out of his way on Thursday night not to throw any gasoline on the fire. Just say, we're going to take a timeout here and we're going to figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I really think Chicago, they want Kane and Toews to make this decision for them.
So they want those two to come to them and say, okay, enough's enough.
It's
done.
Time for us.
Yeah.
I think that's what they want. You know, Kirby Doc, that one, I had mentioned, I think today on NHL Network that I think there were teams I heard in the top half of the first round that were willing to trade for Doc. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was like, I think that was about like they ended up getting the 13th pick for him. I think that's about where we were looking at. Like, I don't think anybody at like 5 was doing that. I think that was the area. I would think that potentially Columbus was in on that too, not with their 6th pick, but potentially their 12.
Yep.
That's where I thought they were going to get. I thought that was based on what I was hearing. I thought that was a pretty fair return for Doc, but I'm shocked at the DeBrincat one. And I think that surprised a lot of people too.
What did you make of the Peter Mrazek deal?
I think
25 and Mrazek for 38.
That's a big win for Dubas to get to only have to move down 13 spots to move Mraz's contract. That's a big win for him.
You know, one person from another NHL team said to me, Chicago just gave Kyle Dubas a get out of jail card. Like that it was, you could have really stuck it to Toronto on this one. And I know that Chicago needs goalies. I get it. I understand all of that. But it felt like, man, this was... Now, I know you can look at it historically and say, wow, that signing cost you a first-round pick. But then as one general manager told me yesterday, and I mentioned this in our open, he said, I don't care about any of these lists. This whole draft is a spray. And that's what this is.
And it was tonight.
And it was a total spray. And I think day 2 is going to be a total spray as well. Like, this is a nice bit of business because Dubas got out from underneath a contract that wasn't working out and a player that wasn't working out for this team. And he's still probably going to get the player that he wanted in the first round. He's still going to probably get that guy. This one was a win for Toronto.
I agree with that. And, you know, the other team I'm looking at is Edmonton. They moved Zach Kassian for picks.
Yep.
And we're going to get, you know, basically Ken Holland admitted what everyone's been talking about. Mike Smith isn't going to play this year. It's just a question of, is he on LTIR? Does he retire? But we're getting closer to clarity on Duncan Keith. You know what? I do think, I mean, we've been talking about this ad nauseum that Jack Campbell is on their radar.
Darcy Kemper back on the radar now?
I wonder.
They were there once.
I'm very curious to hear. I'm curious to see what the Georgiev contract comes at, because that's going to give us an idea. Actually, I want to say that. I think Kemper, obviously, like, I think all these goalies know the market. I think they know the market. I think they know what's out there. I heard someone said to me there's 14 teams that are looking for a goalie. And I think over the last week, the teams, the agents have been, you know, technically it's not allowed, technically, but you're not a good agent and you're not a good team if you aren't bending the rules on Telegram where nobody can read it, or Signal where nobody could read it.
Betraying all the industry secrets here, Elliotte. How dare you?
So, you know, I think that, you know, they're trying to figure out what the market is. And I think Dubas is no different.
Yeah.
I think he knew that if he wanted to get the kind of goaltender he wanted, he had to clear that room. He had to, because I think some of these goalies are going to be in the 5x5 range. And if you want a seat at the top goalie table in free agency, you had to be in that area.
The point about Kemper was, I was wondering if Edmonton is back in the Kemper business. Not Toronto. So I said that team's been there before. Edmonton's been there before with Kemper. That's what I'm wondering about. If the Oilers are back in the Darcy Kemper business, they lost out when Colorado got him.
I think everything is possible, but I would bet that. Look, it's pretty obvious that Kemper had a number, or his representatives had a number when they spoke to Colorado.
Yeah.
And Colorado said, you know, we're not doing that. Just like they did last year with Philip Grubauer.
A number like financial number or term?
No, if I would bet, probably an AAV is as much as anything.
Okay.
And
because I would wonder about if term could be a sticking point considering the injury history.
I think anything's
Again,
possible.
I'm throwing that out there just based on I watch hockey.
We have heard that there's teams talking 5x5 for some of these goalies.
Yep.
I could see Colorado saying, look, we're just not doing that. Pick it, number or term. Yeah. But what that says to me is that Kemper is confident that whatever his market value is in this iteration of a free agency, there was just too much between that and what Colorado was willing to do.
While we're detouring here on goaltenders, and we will get back to the draft, what did you make of Marc-Andre Fleury in Minnesota? 2 years, $7 million.
Not surprised.
Today was a good day for Minnesota, by the way. We can get into this a little bit more, but this is a good Bill Guerin day.
Yes. Yes, he wanted Fleury done badly. He wants a Talbot-Fleury combo, and he's got it.
Was it ever in doubt? Because you asked Bill Guerin that. Was there ever a chance that you weren't gonna get him done?
I think that Fleury knew. I think Fleury wanted to go back to Minnesota. I did. I think that Fleury knew that it goes to. I think everybody here is secretly testing the market, trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
What did I think? I think Bill Guerin's probably worried that there's some good team out there that is going to offer him. For example, Fleury resigned. I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah.
Fleury resigned in Minnesota after Colorado traded for Georgiev. What if Fleury was, for argument's sake, was waiting to see what Kemper was doing or what Colorado was doing? Guerin's a pretty straight shooter.
Yeah.
He clearly, the reason he said he was a little concerned about it is because he was obviously a little concerned about it.
Let's do a quick one on Minnesota, because I think one of the things that everyone will wonder about the first round is, who are you impressed by? Who do you think had a good first? I think the Minnesota Wild had a good day. When it comes to picks, it's always hard because who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what all these players are going to turn into? But I look at what Minnesota did today, and I look at what Minnesota has been able to put together too. And I know the story of Minnesota right now for the next couple of years is going to be salary cap hell.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that. It cost him Kevin Fiala, and the Kevin Fiala trade is something that people still talk about around Minnesota. But unless you're a really hardcore Minnesota Wild fan or know the team well, you're probably not paying attention to what is happening with that team away from the big squad and away from the big story, which is the salary cap and Kevin Fiala. Judd Brackett is doing an amazing job with this team, and Liam Ogren and Danila Yurov are two highly skilled players. As one person texted me today, Minnesota robbed the bank again. You look at what they've been able to. They have high-end players coming at every single position. How many times have we talked about Marco Rossi? Well, he's coming in, and he's coming in on an entry-level deal. Jesper Wallstedt, the goaltender. Carson Lambos, two players they drafted in the first round last year, 20 and 26. That's robbery by Judd Brackett. We talk about the Fiala deal, Brock Faber, University of Minnesota, in the Fiala deal. And then you throw depth defensemen Ryan O'Rourke coming. I know it might be tough for Minnesota Wild fans right now. You have this big salary cap hole in the middle of your team, and it's going to dominate a lot of the conversation. But at the other end of it, this is where a guy like Judd Brackett is so important to the Minnesota Wild. When they get out of salary cap jail, this is going to be really good. This is going to be a really, really good team. It might be a little bit painful getting there, but you look at what Minnesota's been like. I still think that Anaheim is a Cadillac of prospects, and how they develop defensemen is first rate. No one does it better than them, and they just keep on adding quality players. And here comes another center, but Minnesota's right there too. They've done. I think Minnesota's done a marvelous job, and then I throw in what Bill Guerin was able to do today. I just think that Minnesota had a great day, but as far as prospects go, this is just a continuation. Sleep on the Minnesota Wild at your own peril, because they're doing a great job. I think it's an impressive organization.
You know what? One of the things I really look for is the players who fall.
Brad Lambert to win it. Because the thing is, if you would have told me 3 years ago when we really started to hear the name Brad Lambert that he was going to fall as far as he did, we would have said, not a chance. Look at the skill on this guy.
See, that's the thing. I always look at it and say, Lambert, because I always wonder if a moment like that scares people straight. They say, even Shane Wright Shane Wright needed to be scared straight, because I think he's a pretty honest and upstanding guy. I think Shane Wright's last 2 years got ruined by COVID. And I think it hurt him, and I think his game got picked apart because of it. I think that's a great pickup for Seattle at 4. Who's the Nashville kid they picked up? Kemmel?
Yeah, Joachim Kemmel at 17. in Finland.
Yeah, so he was a guy who dropped.
Great shot.
Lambert dropped. I'm always interested.
Jonathan Lekkerimäki to Vancouver at 15. I'm surprised Vancouver didn't sprint to the podium to say that. Like going into this draft, I thought maybe Vancouver trades their pick and picks up another just because they need to stock the shelves. But then Lekkerimäki's there, and how do you not take him? So that to me was a fall right into their laps. But Shane Wright's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of this theory? So someone from one team brought this to my attention and said, outside of Connor McDavid, you know what happens with players that are granted exceptional status? They get their games picked apart more because we have more time to pick apart their games.
Yeah.
Do you think that Shane Wright is a victim of that? If you look at the players that have been granted exceptional.
Well, it happened with Jason Spezza. It happened with John Tavares.
Yeah, Aaron Ekblad, keep going.
Aaron Ekblad. But I think also in Wright's case, COVID changed it all too.
Yes. All the OHL kids. All the thing about the talk around the draft about OHL kids and their development is a big thing.
I had heard that in some of at least one of the interviews, I'll say, there was a team that pressed Wright hard about why he didn't play overseas.
Right.
And basically what they were saying is that they wished he would have made more of an effort to play overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tough one because he was hoping the OHL was going to play, and it didn't happen. And I heard he got really pressed on it. But it still cost him 2 years. It's over now. It's a great place for him. Those are the people I always watch is who falls back.
I think Seattle got a hell of a player. And now Seattle's looking up the gut at Matty Beniers and Shane Wright for the next 10 years as their centers. I mean, how many teams have been out there looking for first-line centers?
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think we were making this point on the show tonight, pretty appropriate that it's Ron Francis that drafts Shane Wright. Like when you look at Shane Wright's game, you tell me that's not someone that Ron Francis looks at and says, man, it's kind of a lot of me in there. Like I was told that the player that Seattle coveted was Simon Nemec.
I believe. I heard the same thing.
You wrote something similar. You wrote about it, and I was led to believe that that's who they wanted. Like they got Matty Beniers. Okay, now they're going to try to get the best defenseman in the draft. And New Jersey beat them to the punch and drafted him second overall. But what a tidy bit of business by Seattle to get Shane Wright at 4. Like the minute that Arizona took Logan Cooley at 3, like what do you think? I always wonder what the conversation is around the table when it becomes obvious that you might get someone that you didn't think you were going to get. And I'm imagining Seattle had that conversation as Logan Cooley was drafted 3rd overall by the Arizona Coyotes. Buffalo Sabres drafted 3 centers. It's interesting going into the assignment that I had this year for the draft was, do sort of, how the prospect fits in, what the prospect pool is, and what each team is looking for. And the thing I wrote down about the Buffalo Sabres was they need more centers. They have a lot of wingers. They're set on the blue line. They need centers. And they drafted 3 of them. Matt Savoy, Noah Ostlund, and Yuri Kulich. That's deliberate.
Mm-hmm. Well, Arizona did centers with their first couple picks with their Coyotes jackets.
I thought they were good. What did you make of that, by the way? I'm glad you asked Bill Armstrong about that because it's one of the things you know.
I'm here to ask the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, what's with the jackets, man?
You know what? I don't mind it.
Try different stuff.
Do different stuff.
Okay, here's something. The NHL General Manager of the Year, the Jim Gregory Award. When I first heard it was going to be handed out at the draft, I thought, well, that's a pretty cool idea. Let's try it. Not sure that it necessarily fit, but nonetheless. Your thoughts on Joe Sakic, winner of the Jim Gregory GM of the Year award this year?
First of all, it was good to see Sir Savard, but I just thought it was a little too long. That was my only issue.
It's Montreal. It's Buckingham Palace in Canada. It's a Buckingham Palace of Canada, or the Bell Centre. It's the closest thing we have to Buckingham Palace.
I just think that, first of all, I don't know how anybody can argue against Joe Sakic. Guy won.
Could Julien Brisebois argue against Joe Sakic?
Well, it is kind of crazy that Julien Brisebois has never won it.
Yeah.
By the way, that's another guy, Isaac Howard, kid who fell. Talk about falling and then landing in a great place, landing in Tampa.
Hang on.
And the kid's hilarious.
Well, he told us at the Combine. Did I tell you this? He told us at the Combine he was going to wear a white suit.
It was fantastic.
He's a great interview. He is. He
what did he say to Carolyn? I'm the best looking guy here, so I should be the best dressed guy too.
I am. He has some confidence about him, sir. He really does. I like it myself. He's a confident guy. He said he was going to wear the white suit, and he went for it. Good on Isaac Howard. I
have no problem with Sakic winning. I just don't. I'm surprised that Brisebois has never won.
I'm the same way.
Just a couple other things out here. Just some news bits. Ron Hextall told us that now he's got a cap number on Letang.
Yes.
He's going to see what they can do with Malkin. It's amazing. I have people telling me, I get such a split of information on Forsberg. I get people telling me it's close. I get other people telling me it's not close. I still lean towards it happening. But I have to admit,
what day is it?
Yeah,
what day is
we've
it?
got
How
5
many days
more
we have
days.
last year?
I'm surprised we're here. I'm surprised we're here. But it's amazing. I have people saying it's close. I have other people telling me it's not close. I don't know what to say about it.
Can I ask one thing on Malkin?
Yeah.
Someone whispered to me today. I was like, because we're talking about the Letang deal. I'm curious about Malkin here, and they were wondering if Seattle could be a fit.
Malkin?
Yeah.
I'll say this. People were wondering about 6 times 6.1 for Malkin. This is purely a guess.
Yeah.
I wonder if there was a team offering like 4 times 9.
Whoa.
On Malkin.
Whoa.
I really thought the deal for Malkin was going to come in from Pittsburgh like a few days ago. So I wrote down on a piece of paper about Letang 4 times 7.5. I thought that was what it was going to be. And I ended up, I am wondering, because it's got to 36 million, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's a team that was willing to do, or Pittsburgh thought there was a team that was willing to do 4 times 9.
Wow.
And that's why we ended up where we ended up. There's been a lot of rumors about Matthew Tkachuk, and one thing I do agree on, that there are teams kind of hovering around this, waiting to see, what the Flames are going to do. And the Flames are going to wait until, they have Johnny Gaudreau's answer. And I still think they're telling people, I know they're telling people they want to sign Matthew Tkachuk. But that doesn't mean that teams aren't hovering around it and trying to figure it out. There's been reports of New Jersey. There's been rumors, because I don't even know if anybody's actually reported it. I know that there have been rumors, and we heard them all, about New Jersey offering the number 2 pick for Tkachuk. I'm just saying right now that everyone's denying it. So I wanted to say, because I think we've all heard this rumor. I don't know if it's actually ever been reported, but we've heard this rumor. Just for what it's worth right now, everybody's denying it. Bryan Marchment. First of all, credit to Mike Greer.
That was beautiful.
Extremely well done. It was it's a very, very hard day for the NHL community. I know you have a story to tell. I just think that people should know that as many people hated playing against Bryan Marchment on the ice, loved him off the ice. So in the last couple of days, there were some individuals who told me about people that Bryan Marchment was best friends with. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say it because I think it's their stories to tell, but I said, wow, he was best friends with this person. Like, you wouldn't have made the connection, but he was good at making connections. And, well, you have some stories you want to tell.
Well, the one that always stands out to me, and I've always loved telling the story because it was just fun and it was just goofy, lovable Bryan Marchment. it was during the lockout, and I was living in the east end of the city in the Beaches, area in Toronto called the Beaches. And I was playing in my crappy men's league hockey. And I'd gotten to know Bryan when he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he just called me up one day and he's like, "You still playing hockey?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Can I come up and play on your team?" And I'm like, we're not even like a A-level like beer league team here. You know, we're like B division. He's like, "I don't care. I just want to go out and play and have some fun. I'm bored." He's like, "I'll come around. I'll pick you up, throw your bag in the pickup truck and we'll go." I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And so Marchment picked me up. He came out a couple of times. Bought beer for all the guys. Was a big thrill. How often you going to get to skate with an NHLer either on your team, or I guess the other teams would have loved it too. Hey, that's Bryan Marchment we're playing against. And just like the biggest smile on his face, just like not having a care in the world and just playing hockey and having fun. Like Bryan Marchment was one of those people that you just knew was always around, had been around hockey his entire life, obviously, and had no plans to ever not be around hockey. It was in his DNA. It was baked in the pie for Bryan Marchment. And I'll just never forget how great he made all of us really bad hockey players feel, as he was very generous with his play and always deferring and always passing and trying to make fumbling bad passes from Marchment.
Try to ever go
There was
at
a
him?
couple of guys that kind of like, this
always
is
that
my
happens.
shot. Like, hey, it's Bryan Marchment. I'm going to see. But it's one of those moments where you forget just like how skilled NHLers are, because he might as well have been Wayne Gretzky out there. Like that's just hockey.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's just like the worst players in the league. You know, you put them anywhere else and they're dynamic. But it was, I think a lot of it was all in good fun too. And every conversation I ever had with him, ask anyone about Bryan Marchment. They'll tell you, he'll stop and have a conversation with anybody and he'll make you laugh and he'll make you feel better about yourself. And it's just, whenever I think of like pure hockey joy, you know, one of the names that comes to mind for me is Bryan Marchment. So I know it was a sad day for a lot of people who are a lot closer to Bryan Marchment. I talked to a couple of them that were on the floor today from a couple of different teams, and it was tough for a lot of people on the floor tonight being there without Bryan Marchment. I thought it was a beautiful touch having the flowers in the chair and having his NHL lanyard over top of it. I'm not going to say that I was really close to Bryan Marchment, but I wasn't. But whenever we saw each other, it was always a kind word and a smile and a quick conversation. From my little corner, I know I'll miss him. We'll all miss him, and his family certainly will, and that's where all of our thoughts are. And the hockey community just lost one of its best people this week in Montreal.